All right, welcome to the 6 1/10 episode of Demon Time. The esports premier podcast, collegiate podcast. I have to put that asterisk in there. I think there's some notable podcasts out there you might be able to find that are a little bit bigger in the esports space, but you don't get to hear us give our opinions, and so we're the real draw here.
We're the best opinion. Our opinion is the only opinion that matters.
Exactly. If you have us, you don't need any other source. We're completely unbiased. We're just the truth, the gospel is what comes out of us.
Yes, I agree.
Exactly.
100,000,000%.
Yes, and I'm obviously, as you might be able to.
What's going on over there? Where you at, Matt? You want to tell us a little bit on what's going on?
Yeah, so DePaul Esports for the EGF playoffs and finals are hosted by William and Mary, and so I'm in the William and Mary. I'm adjacent to the esports facility that's in the room next to me. I just stepped out for a minute from coaching the team to do this lovely podcast, but yes, you can definitely hear them as they get hype warming up. So yeah, should be a great time. You can catch us over on the EGF streams, all the various ones, twitch.tv/official EGF, and all the socials are, you can find your way there.
Looks like I'm gonna have to go there. And also, if you want to check it out, Rocket League is playing tonight, actually in 4 minutes, 4 p.m. I found out about this a couple of hours ago. Yeah. I believe it's also the official EGF stream, but they'll be competing. They played, I can't remember who they played. There's 2 teams they played, are going to be playing today, and then finally at 7:30, I believe, it's Seton Hall. So make sure you support the Rocket League squad.
Exactly, Big East competition rivals. I know D Smash is playing at 7 p.m. Eastern, so that'll be 6 p.m. Central. Also, yeah, Twitch TV EGF or the Smash EGF. So yeah, there should be a lot of good action, honestly. Tons of esports this weekend, so
yes, I love esports. Yes,
exactly.
Yes.
Yeah. And CS:GO will be starting tomorrow at 11 a.m. Eastern, so 10 a.m. Central.
Yeah.
So it'll be bright and early for everybody.
Unfortunately, I actually can't watch it. What's it called? I'm working on a film tomorrow and Sunday.
Oh, okay.
And so I don't know. I'll have to catch the little VOD of it, but yeah. So no live support from Germ.
Unfortunate.
I know.
Yes, but I will say that's actually a good segue, because I think that's kind of what we want to talk about today was pop culture kind of coming into esports. So you want to see film. I mean, an example we gave before we were live, where you're seeing stuff like Naruto and Star Wars like making their way into Fortnite, obviously as like just as cosmetics, and again, that's overall like what most of the role is, but as music artists are collabing with like CS:GO music kits, they bring in a bunch of electronic artists, some rappers, things like that. It's definitely like a interesting space, because I mean, even like esports events are like famously Riot Games always partners with various music artists. Like they make the KDA group, which is actually like people like Madison Beer and various K-pop artists are like perform in cosplay of like League of Legends characters, and alongside like Anna holographic projections and stuff. And Imagine Dragons has a couple songs that they've done in association with Riot Games. So it's definitely interesting to see those kind of worlds collide.
Sorry about the police siren. I don't know if you can hear that, but but yeah, no, I think it's kind of crazy that like there's just this like I don't know what the word is, but like with gaming not being really accepted by society, and now we're seeing these different pop culture icons. I still think it's absurd that Fortnite, like Naruto, and I know I butcher how I say Naruto, whatever. Yeah. And Star Wars, Rick and Morty, they're like Anderson .Paak, Bruno Mars. I don't know. I think it's wild that like the world, like the reality and like gaming is just kind of like coming together in a weird way.
Yeah, no, and I think you make a good point there, like, because I feel like, I mean, I think this has been the kind of like little bracket of years where you go from like gaming being something that like gets you your head dunked in a toilet and done a swirly. Like
Yeah.
I remember like in middle school, like the classic whatever people like ripped up my little like Magic the Gathering cards, like or whatever, like and shit like that. And it's like now it's like you see tons of people are like collecting Pokemon cards again like that, and tons of people are watching anime and like playing video games. Like that's again the video game industry overall, which isn't esports. Esports is a subset of it, but if you're just looking at the gaming industry overall, that's surpassed the film industry as like a bigger entertainment industry,
Yeah.
which is incredible to think about. And obviously, esports overall will grow because of that, because the more esports or more gaming that's out there, the more people that are involved in the esports space. But it's really incredible to see, and it's like also I don't know how that's going to shape the landscape to some degree, because obviously with like music, like I guess like one example would be like music has shifted somewhat because obviously like rap and hip hop has actually surpassed your classical pop music as the number one genre.
Yeah.
Like in music currently, and obviously like famously rap has a lot of sports references kind of in its DNA, and now that esports is like becoming more of a pop culture influence, it's like interesting how there's going to like how those things are going to mix, because there's even that like subculture of rap that's like the nerdcore stuff, where people are like rapping a lot more about anime and all that kind of shit is like working its way in there. So, and that's even like a weird like cultural shift, because I think that's an interesting thing, is that obviously everyone draws so many parallels between traditional sports as it were and esports, but there's a lot of things that are unique to each cultural thing, and you never will know until it becomes prominent, essentially, like what the ripple effects are.
Yeah.
But I don't know, what do you think some of like the broader effects of esports becoming a bigger cultural impact?
Ooh, that's a good question. I guess it like in a way is influencing the way some of our culture is going. It went from not being. I guess it went from influencing the way people were acting with the stereotypes. I think just the idea of like perception versus reality on like a socio-economical standpoint, that like I could take it down that way, but I think it's more so like. Man, I'm struggling to put my words together. It's like esports now has such a wide audience. Like you have kids that are watching, you have people our age, you have people in their 30s, 40s. I know people even in their 50s that are interested in it. And it's like the fact that it has such a wide audience, and it's not just one thing. It's not like football, right? Like football is one thing. Esports goes across so many different genres. I mean, like you have games that vary from like, let's say CS:GO to Beat Saber. And those are like two completely different spectrums. And I think the other thing as well with gaming, with football, you have to be athletically fit to play it. And like to be interested in it, you have to have like a pretty extensive knowledge in football. I mean, you can do it casually, but I feel like you really start to enjoy it when you are able to go deep into it. And then when you get to like gaming, you can just casually know what's going on. Like I don't need to know the players, I don't need to care about the coaches, and I can just enjoy it just solely for that, just because at one point I could be watching some game, some family friendly game, and then go to like some like shooter or whatever else it may be.
That's an interesting point. Like I would say like that you would take it from the angle that there is a lot of broad appeal. I would say like I would agree on some aspects that I think like interesting. Like games are obviously crafted for visual appeal in some ways. Like that's like a very deliberate thing in game design. Whereas sports obviously were like crafted more from a player's point of view. It's like, okay, how is the game just to play? Whereas like you're not having like a art director where it's like, okay, so if you were to put a camera on a drone, how does our sport look from that angle? Whereas that actually is taken into consideration for a game. Is like, how does the screenshot look for a game? How does the, like again, you have like so much more control over the composition of like the environment.
Right.
Whereas like in sports, that's more like a stadium constructor's job. It's like, how does our field look? That's a whole other person's thing, like job to build the environment you're playing the sport. And whereas like if you're in a favela in Brazil playing football for them, like no one care, like no one's considering the visual appeal of the game, like
Yeah.
exactly your goals are just like whatever you have on hand around the house and you're just playing because you a ball like that's, and I mean that's another beautiful thing about soccer is like you don't need any equipment to play it besides a ball,
Right.
whereas esports does have that barrier to entry though, that you do need a stable internet connection and a PC to run it. Obviously, a lot of esports games have tried to lower the system requirements to something, and obviously PCs and the internet are becoming more and more ubiquitous, but that still is a barrier to entry to a large part of the world culturally. But I would think with age gaps and stuff, though, I think sports still has a very like nationalistic quality to it, though, where like for the Olympics, people will just watch the overall Olympics, though, I feel like, and stuff like that, where they will go to I don't know, curling, snowboarding, like skiing, the pentathlon or whatever, the ski shoot, whatever that's called.
Yeah.
That stuff. Or, they might watch rowing or, stuff like a lot of, a number of other sports, depending on which Olympics you're watching, like, that they might not traditionally, like you might follow, baseball during the the rest of the season, but then, when the Olympics are on, you tune in to watch that. And I don't think esports is quite at that level where people would just like, genuinely like, I mean, because again the visual experience is even different, like you're watching Olympics coverage where there is no like esports umbrella coverage, typically. Like you're more like, I'm watching this game, this pro circuit, because it's a Twitch channel, it's specifically built for one thing, or which is actually something interesting that looping back to EGF, they are actually an umbrella organizer that runs in multiple different games, that they do Rocket League, CSGO, Overwatch, like Valorant, and a number of things. So I think that's an interesting thing that like that so many organizers are specified, but that's actually I think a feather in the cap of EGF that they're actually trying to do a broad appeal system.
That's, I guess, yeah, as far as the broad appeal goes, I've never thought with the Olympics. I didn't think of that. I just don't really watch the Olympics that much.
Yeah.
But I guess it makes sense as far as sports goes. I mean, similarly to like, I think like with specific, let's say football games or whatever, that would be like the specific Twitch channels. But then when you get those broader orgs, then it kind of like differentiates around. So I don't know. I feel like I don't know how it's going to change though as we get in the upcoming years, because esports has changed so much, even with COVID, that like. And I guess that was the other thing I wanted to bring up as far as like internet and PCs across the world. I feel internet, I know it's different in third world countries, but internet's becoming more, I guess, like, I wouldn't say it's like a living, like a part of what you need to live, but it's like almost being pushed across that way, if that makes any sense.
Exactly.
And also PCs, I mean, like you're saying, games are getting easier to run. Also components are lasting much longer. I mean, back in like 2012, a GPU, CPU, you could get like 2-3 years before it's obsolete. And now it's like, I had a 1060 up until January, and that card was 6 years old. And it was still like performing perfectly fine, running all esports titles, no issues. So it'll be interesting as like technology and GPUs, CPUs, all of that gets more powerful, kind of like the direction that it goes.
Yeah, and I think that's going to be another interesting point, though, is that like I'm waiting for the day that VR esports becomes like, because I feel again, just like, I mean, people again, monitor quality keeps on getting more and more HD, refresh rates keep on going higher and higher, and I think there always will for a long time that monitors will definitely have their place. But again, I don't know where we are on the timeline of VR, because again, for me, I just think that VR, it seems like one of those technologies that it seems so natural that it would go somewhere, because it's such a unique experience being completely immersed in a world, like, because again, like we live in again, that's like the oldest, the sci-fi things where you have like the whole like I mean, I think AR is also an interesting thing that I've seen a lot of that too, though, with like holographic projections and all that kind of stuff. Like that will be a very interesting thing where, because then that even can blend the physical element. Because imagine like you're playing CS:GO, and in order to move, you actually have to run, jump, aim, and then it becomes like a physical tactical shooter.
Yeah.
That's just a really like immersive version of pin or of like paintball, basically. Like that you can go to. But obviously, like if you're yeah, having like, because again that's a whole other thing, because like esports games again are like pretty compact setups. Everyone can have a setup in their home, but then if the setup's hypothetically like way bigger, if it's like a 360 treadmill, if that ever becomes a thing, like
Yeah.
I think we're probably a long way away from that. But I think VR headsets would be an interesting thing. Would be like, is there going to be more esports titles kind of beyond Beat Saber kind of developed for the VR? Because again, VR development's its own kind of rabbit hole. But I just have this like, I guess, inkling that like, again, I don't think VR is kind of the flying cars, because everyone has that like, oh man, wouldn't flying cars be sick? And but they're kind of very impractical.
Yeah.
At the end of the day. But I don't think VR is impractical. At least I don't. I feel like it is kind of the next level of immersion and experience, which immersion's always like a buzzword thrown around for these kinds of things. So I'd be very curious how that works, and I think. As someone who works in both digital spaces and things, how I think it affects culture is like culture is becoming so digital. Like I think people really, really focus in on like innovation in the digital space, and like yeah, that like again, like their association with life, like you said, is kind of like digital is viewed as like almost the same as reality, which it's not. And I think that's like a dangerous blurring of lines. But on the flip side, I feel like again, if you just have a moderate amount of digital interaction, it can really like be beautiful. Like again, it helps you appreciate the realness around you more in some ways, and also can give you, because again, I think escapism in certain levels is good. It's a positive. Like fiction is enjoyable to read and to play for games, but it's also like it should not subset reality. It should not replace it.
Yeah. Well, it's
Because if it's a snowy day and you're trapped inside, it's like play a video game. That's okay.
Yeah. Well, I mean, okay, so one of the people in the comments brought up the metaverse. I think that's
Yeah.
a good transition to what we're talking about, since it's like they're trying to push it as like it's like Ready Player One type thing, or like Tron Legacy type feels. And I wouldn't be surprised if like VR eventually, if you got like a full experience. I mean, like there's a over in not Schaumburg, somewhere north.
Lyle? Or,
No. I can't remember the city, but there's this it's this big warehouse, and it's like a full VR experience. There's like a horror one, and then like a TDM one, and you can just run around, and like the map is mapped perfectly where like pillars are, so like you can see, so you don't run into pillars and things like that. And when I saw that, I was like, one, that's really cool. But two, I'm interested to see kind of how that can develop, because it's like the people wearing it, they have like this whole like backpack and like setup and everything when they're going around. And I'm just interested to see kind of where like things like metaverse will go, if esports will get involved with it, since I feel like VR, AR is just so underdeveloped still. There's still so much work.
Yeah, and that's like another, like again, we were talking about like, I feel like these are even digital questions, like like AR feels so underdeveloped compared to a lot of other things, and then like it's curious that like so much of our focus has gone to the digital world, whereas like I think, because again, people are all like, there's also those questions of like material science, where people like, because like people again used to be obsessed with like carbon fiber stuff, like oh man, how strong and light of a material can we construct, or like like energy efficiency questions, or like physics questions. Like those used to be like way, I think, bigger on people's priorities list, which is like, I think to me is really intriguing that like again, people are I guess are looking inward into like this this virtual space with so many of their like pondering questions, or like their developmental energy, which I don't know if it's quite a negative thing, but it's been like a very interesting thing as someone kind of in that digital space. Because I mean, that's even like you see how like this, again, just like from an anecdotal point of view, you see the amount of like job postings for like social media graphics and like social media managers, like because everyone wants to optimize their social media like attention, or the attention economy or whatever people call it. But again, that's like a purely like fabricated space essentially, where it's like
Yeah.
people happen to all spend their time on these certain digital spaces, so people want to optimize the billboards they place there. That's literally the thing.
And I guess like the other thing with that is I don't know if it's necessarily a positive or a negative. I think it's both as far as the focus shifting, because I remember like
Yeah.
even a couple years ago with the whole like carbon fiber, people obsessed over that.
Mhm.
More specifically in the running industry, there's a big controversy with the Nike Next Percents. It was like
Yeah.
Alpha Fly or whatever.
Yeah.
So a lot of running shoes started getting like these really thin carbon fiber plates in the sole, which would.
Oh yeah, yeah,
Do
yeah.
you remember this? Yeah, like
Yeah, yeah.
theoretically, well, actually, it does.
Make a huge difference.
Yeah,
Like, yeah.
it makes a huge difference, and you see many athletes that are competing really focusing on it, but they're thinking of full on like banning it because it's like people are putting in so much research and trying to figure out how to make running, I guess, quote unquote, easier,
Yeah.
which wasn't the case. But it's just weird that it's like today you don't really see people focusing on things like that. Like with the whole when like electric cars like Priuses are becoming like extremely popular. It's like all
Yeah.
people talked about: Chevy Volt,
Hmm.
Prius, whatever else, whatever car was electric or first
Yeah.
hybrid then electric,
Yeah.
and there really isn't. It at least it doesn't feel like there's as much of a focus in anything like that, at least in the past like 3-4 years.
Yeah. Like I think also like in the similar sports technology thing, you have like the swimmers. Like I don't know if you knew they had like the shark skin suits, which were like super body tight, and they would shave seconds off your times in
Would it
sprints, which
really?
was yeah, like because again because they would basically be like head to toe, like they would go up to your wrists, and then it's all the way back down to your ankles essentially. It's like a full body
Interesting.
thing,
Why
and
was
it's like
that
again it would.
allowed? Because I thought you had to be like Speedos or
No, like
bikinis.
that's where the rules came in, is where you had to have like certain like length of trousers and stuff, now, like because again, like and same thing with women's suits. It's like okay, it's basically I think typically like cut off above the knee, and then again like women, it's like okay, it has to be this much neckline, this much like stuff like that, and then guys obviously it's like okay, you can only have a trouser length of like this proportion. Okay, it's usually like above the knee, and then like like below the whatever part of your waist or stuff like that. So.
Gotcha.
Yeah, no,
Okay.
I think those rules became really strict because again, like you said, they had whole, teams of people going in and trying to manufacture these super optimal technologies, and it's crazy like the limits that people will push even such a simple tool. Because in running, your
Oh, yeah.
only tool you have is like I guess your clothes and your shoes, and like people are willing to push those shoes enhancements to like
The
such a
max.
exactly, and, because what is still a shoe? You put a rocket booster on.
Hey, if it gets you through the run, I mean, I don't see an issue with it.
Yeah,
Well,
because that's like an interesting like debate is like okay, should we all just run barefoot then and just like the old school Greek Olympics where it's
yeah.
like no equipment basically I don't know because again like I mean that's even there's a part of me that's like what if we did like a performance enhancing drugs are allowed
That
Olympics where
would
it's like
be so interesting. I would
because you just yeah
love to see that.
exactly because you could juice people up as much as you want they're never it doesn't matter what like there's no drug tests so again like because
People
again, it's still like
die.
the human
So many
ability.
people would
People would,
die
yeah, that's
from
the tragedy part of it. Would
OD.
be like,
But that would be so interesting, just seeing someone just like lifting like 2,000 pounds. It's like,
exactly,
ah!
yeah, exactly. Because again, like it's still a human feat, obviously, because as humanity we build tools, so it would be, just a curiosity to see.
Yeah, no,
Uh,
that putting it as a tool is, I think, an interesting words.
yeah, again, because again, it's like, I mean, that's humans' whole thing is kind of manipulating reality for better or worse around them, and I think humans have that fundamental curiosity of doing things like that. So.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think it'd be an interesting rabbit hole, and I think that's like somewhat where the metaverse kind of is like another. I mean, there's been a lot of experiments with like MMOs and stuff and that, and like I don't know, like for me, I feel like the metaverse is very strange because I think you see stuff with Eve that has a fully functional game economy going on, and even has like the whole planets that people will buy and stuff like that. That
Yeah.
like, and there is like that very real thing already present, whereas I think like Metaverse is kind of on the flip side where it's like focusing so much on the economical aspect rather than like why do people wanting to buy anything, you know, like I feel like the current people in Metaverse are like the speculative investors where like the people in Eve who have a full
NFTs.
economy going that has like, because again, the players, like there's real life value to all those fucking ships that everyone's flying around because there's so much in-game currency spent on all of them, you know.
Yeah.
And stuff like that. And so people will, you know, PayPal people thousands of dollars to buy and sell items and, you know, whatnot, or however that trading system works. So I think that's like, to me, you kind of want to build the incentives before the necessarily the structure, I guess. But maybe it's good to stress test those structures so you make sure like your little loop functions, you know, especially when you're on Facebook and you have enough money to burn to kind of like build a more speculative project.
Yeah.
But I think with the metaverse, like again, for certain things, like I think the like for instance the virtual real estate I feel like is very
weird. I think it's weird. Sorry,
strange,
I didn't mean to cut you
especially.
off.
No. I think your voicing your opinion is good. Like, because I feel like a lot of things with real estate is how difficult it is to move. Because you know that's the whole thing with like, I don't know how far metaverse is going to go. Because again, I assume they're going to sell virtual advertising space and things like that. But it's
Yeah.
like, again, are we going to have like fast travel in this metaverse? Because if we don't have fast travel, that could be very interesting, I guess. Because people would have to like walk to a new location to then
Yeah.
you know, do stuff. But again, it's like, is the world going to be limited in that metaverse? But then it's like, again, you can like create a new virtual world with your friends and you can all hop on a server that you can host. Like,
Yeah.
whereas in reality, again, until we get to the like Matrix where we're all like in fucking tanks and we're all like hooked up to neurodes and shit, until we get to there, which we're not there yet. Yeah. But
That's the key word. Yet.
But like, again, in reality, as long as you're like, physically take care of yourself, the digital space it can affect you, but you can always the twisted thing is you always have the choice to exit the digital space if you want to. But like you're saying though, I feel like the digital space, people are like in this weird like almost like hatred thing like out with it, are making the digital space more and more mandatory. I don't know if you agree, but
Yeah. What do you mean by mandatory?
where like you said, you have to basically like be hooked into like the digital systems more and more, or else you're like, because I mean, okay, let's just like take some examples like pay, like less and less places are accepting cash anymore.
Right.
Like for instance, like
Okay.
you're always wanting card payment, and not even always cards. People are now going to like Apple Wallet and Google Pay and stuff like that. Like just you're tapping your fucking phone up against things to pay for stuff.
Okay,
Like,
I see what you mean.
so then you have like, and then you have auto pay. Job applications are online now. You know, it's not, you don't walk into the or and talk to an HR manager and be like, hey, I'd like to work at your fucking place. They're like, apply on LinkedIn, get the hell out of our office, you know? So stuff like that, like that. And also your job response, they're going to want to email you paperwork, you know, like you're not going to get it mailed to you, like things like that. People want paperless billing. People want paperless billing to like, you know, sending money to the places, like your rent's going to be online, like, you know, stuff like, again, like even like I'm in an apartment building where they're like wanting to move away from like physical keys like, because they have like electronic physical keys, but they're slowly trying to make the transition to you have a smartphone app that is like your keys for your apartment. Yeah.
Oh
like, that's
my
super
gosh,
strange.
I would hate that. The reason I would hate something like that is it like a normal key never fails you.
Yes.
An app.
What if your phone's dead?
Yeah.
What
happens if you lose your phone?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. I hate that. I hope more places do not do that.
Like again, I feel like sometimes you take like you take one step forward and it's two steps back, because certain things I feel like again are like they do exactly what you need them to, and there's again, I'm glad that people are experimenting with it, but now like certain things like that are becoming more and more the norm, because people are like, oh, it's cool or like convenient, but I'm like, it's not convenient. You're actually just making bigger problems down the line, or like you know, because again, like keys, they do exactly what you need them to do. Like they keep something secure. Yes, A, but B, you can also pick the lock physically if you need to, and it's still a difficult task.
Yeah.
But something you can do, like, and it's much more like, and it's a skill to pick a lock, whereas like any noob can like can hack something. Like you could download a script.
Not any
like
noob. I got my phone hacked once, and that was a scary situation. I will
Yeah.
tell you that.
Oh no, I'm saying like it's a scary. No, I'm not talking about hacking phones, but I'm saying you can hack electronic locks. Like any person who has the right script can insta get in. Like
Oh,
once someone makes that script,
just
anyone it's
distribute it. Yeah.
because again, whereas like physical locks, again, some people are very quick at picking locks, but that specific person has to be good at picking locks.
Yeah.
It's it's like I can't like if say I can pick locks, like you couldn't go up to like I can't gift you my lock picking skill, which you can in hacking. You can gift someone a script, and they can
Okay.
get stuff done. So
I can't wait to break. You better lock your doors, because I'm coming. While you're in
Exactly.
Virginia, you better
Yeah.
watch out. Well,
you to come for my stuff.
I will take your PC, your food. Yeah, but I keep looking at chat. My friend in chat is actually like popping off. I don't know if you read the last thing he said, but he said the increase of social media and the internet will make us less sociable. I kind of agree with that, since it's like since you bring up about it being mandatory, like it's like you become obsolete in a way if you don't have social media, if you don't have like with gaming specifically, you can't play things if you have obsolete hardware. And so it's like, and 90% of people are just like use social media to meet people. I know there's people at DePaul who've told me, like, with COVID, like people in my my age are like, oh, how Jeremy, how are you able to make friends over COVID? I'm like, I don't know. I sent messages out like, oh, if I found someone interesting in class, yo, you seem chill or whatever. Like, yo, what's up? Talk to them outside of it. It's the same thing as in normal, except you're typing like 90% of everything. So I mean, we're already seeing like people becoming less sociable in a way.
Yeah.
And I think if we switch to being like fully metaverse, VR, AR, will just, I feel like it'll further that even more.
Yeah, I heard someone describe social media as anti-social media, and I feel like that's very much like what it functions as, and I think it becomes like
media.
I've
never heard that before.
But I mean, I think that's ultimately what it functions as, is it destroys a lot of human, like, pillars of human interaction, which is like listening and like discussion and stuff. Because again, you have like can build echo chambers because of algorithms. Like, secondly, you have like again, there's no productive discussion because there's also like no consequences. It's just all like anonymous, because again, you'll see like fake reports, like say like you're a fake reporter, and it's like, unless your name is attached to an article, you see this in esports actually. That's a good thing, at least I've seen. Like, you have insider, like some anonymous insider leaks something, like it's a Reddit like fucking account, and you're like, who are you? Who do you know? Whereas like, because again, it's just anonymous person. Whereas like, if it's like, hey, I'm Elliot Friedman, the hockey insider. Like, this guy, he's known for he has skin in the game. It's his name, his person. Like, they'll again, it's like he's signing off on all his insider leaks. So again, you have stake in the thing. You can't just delete your account. You can't delete yourself. That's the philosophy thing. But so you can't do that. And then secondly, like, also when you're the consistent same person with your same name attached to it, you build credibility over time. Like, because again, it's like, okay, this report was correct. This report was correct. Okay, this is his third report that he's gotten in a row. His fourth, his fifth, and keep on, because then you become an actual insider, and then people can trust you. Like, oh, he actually has inside sources. But if someone like takes some like rumor they hear on it, because I've legit seen that, because obviously it's the beat writers who are who kind of, again, in this kind of self-created cycle, they want clicks, so they want any drama, and so they'll literally like cite Twitter comments like, oh, we saw a bunch of Twitter comments that were dissatisfied with this thing in esports, and you're like, you're sort of citing randoms on Twitter, like not even a on the street poll, which again is if you take any sort of survey dynamics class, is a very flawed survey. But it's like, at least again, you had a physical person, because again, on Twitter someone can have 14 burner accounts. That's very possible, so it's very like crazy to see, to me, like how much like stake is put into anonymous opinions essentially on there. And again, that's the whole like psychology of it, though, is I feel like as a human, when you're reading the text, it feel like the whole game is engineered that it feels real, but it has a lot of fake elements, like plastered in. It's like it's a facade. It's not. There's no like real depth and punch to it. But when you just look at it at a glance, it can be very impactful.
Well, that's just, I feel that's all across all type of like, even I guess all industries. It's the
Yeah.
like, who told you this? It's like, my mind told me it.
Yeah.
So I mean,
Which is a legitimate thing to some degree, like that you can just have thoughts like from your inner self and things that are just fundamental to understanding. But
it's like there's a difference between like a rumor about like someone or a game
yeah,
or whatever than like
true.
a fact or like something you
Yeah.
feel about a game, which people don't
Yeah.
understand.
Exactly, and I would agree like that. I think also like this is like my more kind of esoteric discussion, but I think also like um as a discussion I've had is like that. I think with when it comes to discourse, it's like, and this is even an esports thing, because like again, esports, your goal is to you win at the end of the day, and it's like ultimately you have to like be able to move past problems, because problems are going to come up in any sort of environment, and it's like you have to understand that if you believe something very strongly, someone else can believe something opposite of that just as strongly as you hold your belief.
Yeah.
And like that has to like not cause cognitive dissonance, because it's like, again, like you believe someone that's super strong and they don't believe that, and it's like you have to understand that that can function in reality. And if you these two, person A and person B, who have completely opposite worldviews, need to achieve a common goal, how about you can like don't bring up those opposite worldviews in conversation? Because a lot of times, very often, those certain things, especially if it's petty shit, can just like be dropped. Like in the context of an esports game, let's say it's the strategy. Like one person was like really dead set on one call, someone else is dead set on a different strategy call. Okay, it's the next round, you're not in that strategy situation anymore. You guys can both drop that because it's actually irrelevant to the rest of the match at that point, And it's like,
Oh yeah.
because again, that's a valid, because again, in practice, you can bring that up and actually like tit for tat. Okay, break down, why do you think this way? Break down your principles, because that's the other thing, is you have to break down what your definitions of that strategy were. It's like, okay, why do I choose strategy A? Why do I just try to choose strategy B? Because that's another thing. I have a lot of pushback with people that I try to work with in a coaching aspect. That's obviously my role today, is like, you can't just say an opinion and just like leave it at in a context of of an actual debate, because that's, again, conversation is one thing, you're just trying to have an enjoyable conversation. But when you're actually debating and getting into the nuts and bolts in a sports team, you need to like be able to define why you think the way you do, because you're talking with other people in a 1v1 game. That doesn't matter. You're just you can be like, I don't know, Cthulhu told me and possessed my mind, and that's why to some degree. And like again, all the only person you're screwing over is yourself if you have no like method of the game. But in a team game, you do have teammates you're having to work with, and so you have to like justify your decisions. And you can justify your decisions with certain language, but let's say your teammates don't understand that language, you're gonna have to like go down. I think like that's why it's so important to be like, what are your first principles? Is like, I view the game, you should be decisive and aggressive, and that will like, and then when you like, again, when you discuss that with another player, it'll bring a lot more understanding of like, oh, why did you peek in this one-on-one? But they're like, well, I believe peeker's advantage mechanically is such a huge broken effect, you should always take advantage of it. So in any given situation, you should be the one peeking,
Yeah.
And that, again, but if you're just like, why did you peek in this one-on-one? Because I felt like it. And they're like, what the fuck are you talking about? You're an idiot. And then that's how the whole argument, but it's like, hey, I view the game that this is a super powerful thing. Because then that's the real discussion, is like, oh, is peeker's advantage enough of an advantage in that situation for it to be correct? Because then that's the real discussion you want to have.
I guess like taking it in a way of like, I guess people's ideologies and philosophies definitely. I guess like it. How do I want to put this or phrase it? I guess it also, when you're online, especially with gaming, like really supporting your own way. It's so much easier when you're online to just like, if you're gonna yell, if you're gonna argue, whatever it is, and being like face to face. There's like a different, not a lack of understanding, but like there's just, I guess, standards aren't really visible. That's like an extreme, but you know what I mean? It's like when you're behind like, people are much more prone to I guess like lashing out and acting out when they're online because
Yeah.
it's like a barrier of the screens right here. It's not like
Yeah.
if I said like
Hmm.
if I was in your face and I said something mean, like you could, if you wanted to get mad, like it's much easier, I guess, to have
Yeah.
like just whatever reaction, whether it's
Hmm.
normal, extreme. But like when you're online, I agree, it's like the
Hmm.
anonymity or like just being anonymous
Yeah.
makes it where it's like you can kind of do whatever you want.
Yeah, and it can get really disrespectful really fast because you have there's no
Yeah.
consequence. Like again, you're never going to see the person again.
Right, yeah. Unless it's this
Exactly.
podcast, then I'll see you
Yeah.
like on Monday or
Next
something.
week. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. No. So I would agree, and I think like I will say like you can definitely have those like heated conversations in person as well. Like no doubt, but I think it is real, and I think like one of the biggest things though is like that can be generated from a lot of time in digital space. It can be like a lack of listening skills. I think that's like actually I would say that's almost
Oh,
because
that's
you
a
can give
good,
your thoughts because
yeah.
again social media is very much a one-way platform. It's a I'm projecting this, and so again if you're an artist I think social media is actually a positive thing. Like stuff like art stations actually I think a good in the world because you get to basically view art museums online. You can just look through beautiful art like whenever you want to, and the fact that people don't take advantage of it to me is like mind-blowing, where you can just like look at art that used to be like locked away but behind some rich person's house. You can just like look at it on your phone while you're sitting on the toilet. Like I think that's pretty. That's like a net good. I think in the world. Like, but again, I think that is ultimately a one-way form of communication, though. Because even comments, there's a clear hierarchy. It's a clear like this person's the I don't know, the creator, and I'm just some reply guy on Twitter. So it's like you're not
Yeah.
having this actual intricate debate. Because again, like what we just said, the internet isn't built for debate because there's no consequences. There's no accountability, where you're going to meet this person again and so on and so forth. So it's not built for debate. But then if you keep on interacting in a way that isn't built for debate, you're again, like we said, your social skills in that way will kind of grow rusty. And so then when you're in a situation where you need to debate, you have no tools in the toolbox for that.
Well, I think it's interesting that like when the internet, I guess, was popularized and made, not even before it's mainstream,
Mhm.
it's always been a very toxic place. I remember when I was first, I don't know when the first time I really used the internet. I mean, like when I was
Mhm.
like young, like 4 or 5, like play
Yeah.
like computer games,
Yeah.
laptop games, like
Mhm.
addictinggames.com, things like that.
Yeah.
But I never really used like Xbox live parties. I didn't have
Yeah.
a PS3 until like
Mhm.
2013,
Mhm.
I think. Um, and I remember one of my friends, he moved to like Sweden, and I remember talking to him at one of my friends' places, and he was just trash talking me. I'm like, I haven't seen you in like months. Like, what are you doing?
Yeah.
But it's like, it's interesting that there's never been like there's slowly reform happening as far as I guess like the law behind online stuff, but there's still a lot
Yeah.
of like gray lines in what you can do,
Mhm.
and it's like people say, oh, freedom of speech, this and that, but then it's like if you said some of these things in person, like if you get hit, if you get smacked, it's just kind of like that can't happen when you're
Yeah.
online.
And it's like again, like what's the point of those interactions sometimes even in person? It's like you said some inflammatory remarks. It's like okay, why? Like what again? What's your like goal of this inflammatory remark? Was it just to tilt people? And it's like okay, I guess your worldview is like irritating people is like what brings you joy in some way, and it's like okay, people are not going to like that, so you're going to have a negative reaction from a lot of people. And again, if that's your goal, I guess again you're allowed to have that goal, but you have to understand how other people are going to view you then as a person. And again, if you're okay with being hated, like feel free, but like that's a lot of bridges you're going to burn, and like then you can't circle back and be like, oh, why do these things happen to me in my life? Like like let's say you're like, hey, you know, I don't have great friends. Like, yeah, that was your example. It was like, hey, how do you make friends? And it's like, then you interact with them and they say tons of inflammatory stuff to you, and you're like, that if this came up in this fast of a thing, you just like insulted me, and it's like, this is like the first conversation we've had, and you just
Yeah.
insulted me. Like, that's not a very good first impression to make with someone, you know? Because again, everyone can be all like, you know, accepting as they, you know, and it's great that acceptance has become more of a thing. But again, there's certain lines just in general that still can't be crossed. And it's just like, again, it's just like a basic like appearance and also like social skill. Because again, just like being a kind person in social situations, like can get you far, you know, to some degree. And again, it's
Yeah.
like you don't have to bend over backwards for people, but just like the absolute bare minimum of politeness gets you really, really far.
Yeah, I think also like a smile goes a really long way. I know
Yeah.
some people like when I swear some people don't understand when I got a mission, like if I gotta go get groceries, my mission, I got my headphones in, I'm locked in, I don't see no one, I don't see anyone. But like people will tell me, you know, Jeremy, a smile will go a long way. Like I agree a, a lot with that because I'm not gonna lie, like when I'm just having a bad day, if I see other people that are like angry or like down and like it just kind of like brings me down too. So like I'm
Yeah.
guilty of like being that person who like doesn't like smile that much, you know what I mean? Or I guess like being in my own little world, I guess
Yeah.
is the way to put it. Um, but no, I agree. It's like a lot of people with the internet and especially with COVID don't have basic social skills, don't have basic manners. I know
Mhm.
we've seen it in like the gaming center. Like no
Yeah.
shame to the people. It's just kind of like sometimes it's really hard to have conversations with people because it's like
Yeah.
like I'll be talking about something and they'll be like, "Yeah." And they'll just kind of like stand there or whatever, or, like try to have a conversation and like I'm trying, but I, like you know what I mean? Like you just can't go anywhere with them.
Yeah, because again, I would say on the conversation struggling, I think a couple basic things is like I said, the listening skills. Because I've had people where I will like state something, and then I'll be like, and then they will misquote me literally immediately back to my face, and they'll be like, "You
Really,
said
that
this," and I'm just
happens?
like, "Yes, I know," because I will make a statement. Then they will say, I like, why the fuck are you saying this thing that I literally just did not say? It's a misinterpretation. Like, it's not even a misinterpretation. They added and subtracted words that I didn't say, and it's just like,
Really?
I'm like, I never said that. And they're like, you totally said that. And it's just like,
Yo, you are
uh,
getting gaslit. That is
exactly. And
what
it's like,
is
okay,
happening.
you know, well, exactly. And then I've even had, like, again, if it's a group setting, I'll have other people be like, Matt never said that. And it's like, and they'll be like, no, you're all wrong. And it's like, okay, like, what more can I do to, because again, for me, it's always the, what can I do to change your mind? And if there's nothing that will change your mind about a thing, what are we doing here? You know,
Yeah.
if you're literally like, just because again, if you can never be convinced that you're wrong, you just think you're God. That's what it is.
Yeah, I guess it's
Because
like
there's
yeah.
no justification to be always right unless you're a divine figure.
Or you're just narcissistic.
Well, yeah, I mean that is thinking you're God. So I think that's the
True. Okay. Yeah, you're right.
yeah.
Okay. I feel like as well. uh, There's like a thinking you're always right. That's another like power thing. Like because when you're online, you could just be like, if someone's arguing with you, and even if you know you're wrong, I've done
Yeah.
this before too. You're just like you just say kind of you just say dumb things over and over again, and you just like talk over them, and you just like piss someone off to the point that they're like, you know what, fine, you're right. You know what I mean? So I feel like there's a sense of like power that goes into it as well,
Mhm.
because if you know that you can eventually convince them, or
Yeah.
not necessarily convince them, but like
Mhm.
just drive your point into their head to the point of them being like, okay, I I, I feel like that's a different way because there's a lot of people I've dealt with online
Mhm.
through games, you know, yeah, when I've played competitively that, you know, will think, I think with esports specifically, think that their
Yeah.
philosophy is right, like no matter what.
Yeah.
And you can show them, it doesn't work here. They'll be like, yeah, but so,
Yeah, but and I think that's a really frustrating. Sorry to cut you off, but
no, you're
that is
good.
exactly the mentality I get frustrated with, because it's like, let's say you like in a situation in a game, you're like, they say their philosophy, you're like, hey, it doesn't work in this thing. They're like, yeah, but it's like, no, 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 this isn't about the but. It's like
It doesn't
this
work, bottom
situation, it
line.
doesn't work. What's
Yeah.
it? 1 second. Do you need the password again?
So guys, this is Germ Hour on Germ. This is the Germ Minute on the esports section. Um, It's nice 57 degrees here in Chicago. And Matt is back from the germ hour, it looks like. He is not back from the germ hour, but Chicago gonna have some rain. Welcome
Yeah,
back to we had a little germ hour happen.
exactly. Yeah, no, it's the CS:GO team. It's being the coach and the manager. I gotta help the boys out. But yeah, no, they had some salacious accusations, Jeremy, that you're a sex worker. So unless
Huh?
you have something you're not telling me, yeah,
Whoa, 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 whoa. What? Oh, hold
yeah,
up. Um,
no,
we can't talk about that.
yeah,
Um,
yeah.
well,
Yeah. So yeah, no, like I said, so salacious accusations, but we'll move on. We'll go back to
yeah,
our original point. But yeah, like you said, if you're like your point is like your strategy doesn't work in this case, and they're like, but it does in another case. It's like that's not the argument. My whole
yeah,
point was on this example that it didn't work. Because again, and that's another thing, is that no one should ever take that just like, hey, in situation Y, you shouldn't do this. It doesn't mean you're always wrong or I'm attacking you as a person. It's very much in esports. It's like I am critiquing this element here. That does not throw everything out. It's just, hey, let's do a little zig instead of zag at this exact moment. Everything else is fine. And I
yeah.
think for a lot of people, they will get hurt by if you're just because for me, that's why I try to in all my criticism is you can always do the sandwich technique where it's compliment, critique, compliment type stuff like that, where it's because you just want to scalpel out. Because again, most of the time when you're dealing with collegiate esports players, they're at a pretty good level,
Yeah.
and so. And obviously, at a lower level, sometimes it's just play more. Honestly, is to help that solves a lot of the problems and give some very broad advice and just kind of gently guide them because it's only at that higher level when you really just need to kind of be a bit more nitpicky, where you're like, hey, swap this thing out, swap this little element out to help kind of guide someone to be a better player.
And the other thing, I guess, with esports and people with their ideologies is this applies in all aspects of life, but I
Yeah.
feel when I just to ask people to talk to me about themselves or their game, they become so much more open to
Yeah.
both compliments and criticism because
Yeah.
people love talking about themselves. I love
Yeah.
talking about myself.
Exactly.
So I
Yeah.
don't know. There's that
No,
aspect of appealing to the person.
no, you've hit it out of the park right there. Honestly, that's I think one of the best ways to kind of be able to have a discussion about gameplay is hey, how do you see your game? How would you describe your gameplay to me, essentially, and stuff like that? And having those kinds of them leading the discussion is definitely a great way to go.
Yeah, yeah. So
Exactly.
I don't know. It's weird. It's a weird thing, especially in esports,
Yeah.
because you also have. I don't know what it's been like for you, but I've experienced a lot of fragile egos.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, no, exactly. I think again, and it's very difficult to develop. I think it's self-confidence and resilience are very difficult to develop, and there's a lot of things that can damage them without you even really knowing them. Because I think also things like shit talking yourself can definitely be very detrimental, even if you don't realize it. Because again, it's you'd be surprised how much the reinforcement can go positive or negative, and also you want it to not be so erratic where it's oh, you're crazy up one moment where you're oh my god, I'm the best player ever, then something goes wrong, you're oh my god, I'm shit, and things, and having that sort of constant up and down all the time, and again, it can and there's a lot of other problems that can kind of crop up surrounding those kinds of things. And again, everyone's going to be a flawed player in some way, and you're wanting to in esports okay, how do we polish off those flaws? And again, it's you're trying to want to find 5 players who kind of function together and it works because again, you're okay, this person's strength covers this person's weakness, or these two people's strengths kind of multiply each other. You want to kind of have the team be more than the sum of its parts rather than less.
yeah,
Because I think that can definitely, especially with something like fragile egos, let's say you have a fragile ego, and then you have a player that's an abrasive player. Because again, those are so someone that kind of gets on people's nerves, because again, those players can be very skilled, because that's a whole different thing, like, rather than someone's personality. But it's like, oh, you have someone who gets on everyone's nerves, and then you have a player with a fragile ego. That's a bad combo, because that player that kind of is plays a bit on the edge is going to probably drive that player with a fragile ego up the wall and kind of really get them down on themselves. And then again, you have someone who's with the fragile ego who's playing worse, because again, they're not feeling good, and so then they're going to play worse, and that's like not what you want in your team at all. And so that's a sports psychology question in some ways, and it's also like, okay, how do you try to fix the player's sense of self and ego without destroying their skills? Because sometimes, like, there's almost positive and negative. So sometimes some player who's very aggressive and does like really decisive great plays is because, say, they have the ego but it is fragile, and it's like, okay, let's say you bring them to a more stable place, but now they're not going for those ballsy plays when they are at their best, and that can be like a finger. It's like, oh man, at their best, they were doing different things. So it can be a very like I don't know, fine problem, as it were.
Yeah, and I feel like also you're able to, even with the bad combinations, I feel like each person kind of like has their own, I guess, like unique ability that can help or worsen the situation.
Yeah.
So I feel like, I don't know, looking at it negatively, it's like it won't work if you look at it negatively, but I feel like good coaches like will be able to like take that and be able to work with it as best as possible, because even though like on paper it may not work well, I still feel you could still work around different tendencies. I know we've had specific people like you and I have dealt with where it's like so some of the ways they act may be, a little, but, if you just mentor them and guide them in the right way, you can, like, bring the really positives very highly in them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think good coaching could definitely do tons and tons of work, but I think there's also a lot like a buy-in the players have to have. And so when the things do go well, I think a lot of credit should go into players for fixing themselves and maturing as individuals and stuff like that. That should, not just be credit to the sports staff, because again, you can try to like tell, and I think we've both discussed this, that one of the most frustrating situations can be discussing with a player and them not wanting to take the steps that you as a mentor want. Like, you're like, hey, I think we can solve this issue if you try this.
Yeah.
And then they are not willing to try it. That can be very, frustrating, because again, it feels very like helpless situation where you're like, what more can I do in this, scenario, essentially.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, but I think that's also part of the skill, is that communication, though, to bring them over to like, okay, wanting to try the thing, in some way.
Yeah. But that's I feel that's a whole other feat in its own. Players
are
of finicky, interesting creatures, to say the least.
Yeah, and I think that even like ties into like how the what like the opinion is of the, like, again, because players' opinions are going to be so drastically different. They have different tastes and things, and that's why I think like how we're integrating like the pop culture stuff into to try to bring it for a circle, briefly, because we are heading towards the end of our time here. I think that's also something where it's like you have to kind of have a diverse things that you're bringing into esports and that you're bringing out of esports, because like, again, there's so many different tastes and flavors going on that and like esports is such a broad umbrella that I think like people think of it as this like they try to shoehorn esports too much, like where it's like you can take inspiration from like so many different things. Like, you don't want to just mimic everything, because the individuality of what esports truly is, like the true essence of esports, is actually, if you try to tap into that, that's what's going to take you the farthest, rather than being a knockoff version of anything else. And it's not to say that you can't take inspiration, but I think you shouldn't just wholesale like tit for tat, like, okay, we copy and paste A, B, C, D, why not take A from over here, B from over here, C from over here. D is something, oh, we just kind of like came this up with ourselves, and we just kind of was in the moment fun thing, and stuff like that. So I think that that's, I think, the personal direction. But I don't know what you think is like what some of the best plans are of like, defining esports as a cultural entity, like, because again, it's still in the stages where it could be drastically guided in a variety of different ways, and I think we've seen big culture shifts in esports already.
Yeah, I honestly don't know how to like if there is like one specific way to like describe it, just because
Mhm.
people's interests are so different, the games that are in it are so different. It's covers like such a wide uh, th- there's a wide spectrum of types of players, types of casters, coaches,
Mhm.
audiences. It's like
Mhm.
the way that it influences different parts of pop culture as well as integrating it is
Mhm.
just I don't know. Esports, I don't think there's been another hobby or activity or sport that has, I guess, grabbed so much for, I guess, I don't know. It just applies to so many different aspects of society, and it's continuing to change and grow that it's just like, I personally can't like place a definition on that.
Yeah, I think that's actually a really, really fine thing that you said. Like that esports, I think its role in culture has become something completely different because basically a lot of other things fit pretty neatly into boxes. Because it's
Yeah.
like, all right, games have been around since the dawn of man. Now we just play them with computers instead of like dice. Like, it's like, and we still play them with dice, but it's like video games are very clearly, ultimately, like again 90% is like it's a very clear like delineation where it's like all right, you have physical board games and you're just using a computer to do some of the behind the scenes math. It's like
Yeah.
you're playing Risk, and it's like rather than having to go in the rule book, okay, how many soldiers are generated by how many territories I have, you can just have a computer be like, you have 17 territories, so you get 4 soldiers. That's really easy, that's nice.
Right. Yeah.
But that's still the same. Whereas in sports have been around since the dawn of man, athletic competitions, war games, and a variety of other physical feats, just for the thrill of it. But now we have these esports where you're taking like digital games that are competitions, and they're definitely like feats of dexterity and human expression, but they're created in such a different way, and they are bound by so little because again, physical sports are like, okay, what's the mortality rate? Because again, maybe there's a Himalayan cliff diving sport, but after the eighth guy dies from jumping off like Mount Everest, like maybe they're like, this is a bad sport. This is not something we want to do.
Yeah.
Where esports, again, you're just limited by your development, and then now you're making that competitive essentially. And there's again, you can like the sky's the limit because you're building a virtual space to compete in, and so now you can suddenly be a magical caster or whatever if you want to be.
Yeah. And I feel as like time also goes on, I guess like the labels kind of like that are behind it are gonna go completely away. I don't
Yeah,
know if that makes any sense. Like,
like that esports won't like it won't be considered really esports. We're gonna reach some different where it's just kind of like its own like unique like or just like
yes,
there's gonna be like
exactly, yes.
yeah, it's gonna be stripped away in a sense. Okay.
Like
Yeah,
we'll
that'd be
still
interesting.
have actual esports, but I feel there's going to be like a different culture behind it as well.
Yeah, you
And
might just say it's CS:GO. Like you won't even have to like have like it'll be
yes,
at such a level
yes.
where it's like it's just you're playing CS:GO at a high level. It doesn't there's no like, oh, it's this video game. It's just like, oh, I'm playing this.
Because like you look at like with football, for example. I know I
You don't
keep
ever
going back
say
to
like, oh,
football.
I play real like physical sports. I play football, like
Right.
it's just
Yeah,
you
well,
play football.
yeah, like and it doesn't matter if you're saying, "Oh, let's watch football." Like you don't need to. Are we watching NCAA? Are we watching NFL? It's just we're watching football, or we're gonna go play football. It's not like, oh, I play professional football. I
Yeah.
play minor league or whatever. I don't know what it's called
I
for
play rec
football.
league football. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, and so I feel esports will definitely eventually get to that point. Like, yeah, I play CS:GO, and then you could be like, yeah, I played CS:GO on a team.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's actually an interesting thing. Like, or it kind of transcends this esports little box that it's somehow because I think that's like a whole inferiority complex to some degree, where it's like, oh, again, we haven't moved past that, but I think we're taking steps in the right direction.
Well, as far as steps in the right direction, I think the next step in the right direction is ending off today until next Friday.
Yeah. All right. This has been Demon Time. Thank you all for tuning in.
Thank you. Have a good one, everyone.